Welcome back to Capitol Tonight. I'm sure that you have heard about this case. In March, a Maryland father of three and a union construction worker, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who came to the U.S. illegally 14 years ago, was taken in by ICE for a second time. This time, without due process, he was shipped off to a notorious prison in El Salvador, the very place a judge ruled in 2018 he was not allowed to be deported to because a local gang there had threatened his family's business and promised to kill him and rape his sisters. Abrego Garcia's case has wended its way through the courts all the way up to the Supreme Court, which ruled that the Trump administration must facilitate his return to the U.S. But instead of doing so, the administration argued that the Supreme Court ruled in their favor and that they don't have to facilitate anything that they don't want to. So what, if anything, can the Supreme Court do at this point? For that, we turn to Dr. Vin Bonventre, the Jackson Distinguished Professor of Law at Albany Law School. Great to see you, Vin.
Susan, always great to be with you. You know that.
This is a crazy case. How can the Trump administration say that the Supreme Court ruled 9-0 in their favor when the court stated the administration must facilitate, this is an important word, Abrego Garcia's return? What am I missing?
No, look, you're not missing anything. Can you imagine this court ruling unanimously? Right? Really something. And then you know what happens subsequently? The Department of Justice sends this lawyer into this federal district court judge's courtroom, and the judge asks him questions, and he says, "They haven't given me any information." I mean, it seems to me that the judge can certainly hold officials of the Department of Justice in contempt, and they might even be able to sanction this lawyer for coming into court so unprepared. So there are things that courts can do.
All right. Now, a lower court said that the Trump administration had to effectuate and facilitate the return of Abrego Garcia because they had made a mistake. This guy wasn't supposed to be deported. The Supreme Court, though, only said facilitate. What is the difference here?
Well, we don't really know, and that's what may really prolong the litigation here. We don't know exactly what the Supreme Court meant. And, you know, in fairness to the justices, there probably were disagreements among the justices about how far they should go. So they used the term facilitate, which seems to be about as innocuous, right?
Right.
A verb that they possibly can. But at least what it means is the Trump administration is not allowed to do nothing, which is what it is doing right now. You can't sit back and say, well, the president of El Salvador doesn't want to send this individual back. They can't do that. Now, look, we use the terms uncharted territory and constitutional crisis probably a little bit too much, but we're getting pretty darn close to exactly that right now. You know, the Supreme Court ordered Truman, to stop trying to seize the steel mills during the Korean War. They ordered President Nixon to hand over the tapes. They both agreed. Even more recently, remember, they told President George W. Bush, you've got to provide the Guantanamo detainees with some habeas corpus and other fundamental rights. And George W. Bush obeyed the court's order, even though he really didn't want to. But we don't know if we're going to get that kind of compliance with Trump. And then the question is, what the heck can the courts do, including the United States Supreme Court? They're not completely powerless, but it's very, very difficult for them to do anything with regard to the president concerning foreign affairs.
Right. And that is because, and I took this, I'm reading from, that's because the president has absolute immunity from criminal prosecution thanks to the Supreme Court. Isn't that correct?
That's right. But other administration officials do not. And other administration officials cannot come into court and defy court orders. For example, lawyers can be sanctioned. If lawyers come into court and they lie, they can be sanctioned. They come into court and they argue something frivolously, they can be sanctioned. If members of, for example, ICE or Homeland Security or the Department of Justice or the Department of State, they defy the court orders, they can also be sanctioned with civil contempt. So you either comply or you're going to be fined until you finally do comply.
Two quick questions. So Abrego Garcia was alleged to have been an MS-13 terrorist, was never proven.
Right.
But do people who come to the U.S. illegally, do they get due process?
Well, that's exactly what the Supreme Court and the lower courts are saying. Look, we're not going to interfere with the president's foreign affairs powers, but we do know that detainees, immigrants, those who you want to deport, they are all entitled to due process, that is notice of what's happening, and they're entitled to a hearing, an opportunity to be heard. This fellow was not given any of those things.
No. What are you going to be watching, Vin, in this case?
I'm going to be watching the extent to which the United States Supreme Court backs up these federal district court judges. You know, the Chief Justice of the United States, John Roberts, is extremely concerned about the extent to which the president seems to be suggesting that he doesn't have to follow Supreme Court or federal district court orders. You know, we've heard that from him. We've heard that from Elon Musk. We've heard that from the vice president.
Right.
I don't think the Chief Justice is going to be tolerating that.
Got it. We have been talking about the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia with Dr. Vin Bonventre, the Jackson Distinguished Professor of Law at Albany Law School. Vin, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Hey, thank you for inviting me, Susan.
Thank you for watching our YouTube channel. Let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth political coverage, and click the subscribe button right here. You can also download our app or watch us on TV to learn more about the candidates, where they stand on the issues, and more. We'll see you then.